I want to be honest about why I'm making this video. It's not the first time I've made it in my head. I've started it maybe a dozen times, usually standing at the kitchen window with a cup of coffee going cold, watching a particular bird at the holly bush by the fence, a male Northern Cardinal. He has a small notch in his right wing, one primary feather, slightly asymmetrical, the kind of detail you'd only notice after paying close attention for a while. I've been noticing it for 4 winters now. He first showed up in November 2020, the same week my dad died. I'm not going to tell you that means something. I'm not going to tell you it doesn't. What I can tell you is that this video has been sitting in me for a long time, and I think it's finally time to make it. Part of what's made it hard is that I didn't want to get it wrong. I didn't want to be the person who tells you to believe something I can't verify, or the person who tells you to disbelieve something that's carried you through a hard season. So I tried to figure out what I actually know, what the science says, and where the science stops. If you've ever had a cardinal keep coming back to your yard, to your window, your feeder, a specific spot you've started to think of as his spot, you've probably heard 2 things. You've heard people say it's a sign, that someone you've lost is sending you a message, checking in, letting you know they're still there. And you've heard other people, usually people who mean well, tell you that's superstition, that you're projecting, that you're seeing what you want to see, that it's probably a different bird every time anyway. Here's what almost no one tells you. The science on this is more interesting than either of those answers. When you understand what's actually going on, why that cardinal keeps coming back, who that cardinal actually is, it doesn't close the question. It opens it wider. I want to work through 3 things people believe about cardinals in their yards. 3 things that seem obviously true and turn out to be more complicated than that. Stay until the last one. That's the one I've been sitting with for 4 winters, and I still don't have a clean answer for it. Welcome to the channel. If you're new here, subscribe before you leave. Because what we do here is talk about backyard birds, and sometimes about the moments when paying attention to them becomes something bigger than you expected. Let's start with the thing most of us want to believe, that the cardinal keeps visiting because he's choosing you, that he's showing up for you, that there's something intentional about his presence, a decision being made, a preference being expressed, a bird that could be anywhere, arriving at your window. I understand why this feels true. When the same red bird shows up at the same spot, morning after morning, it does feel like attention, like being selected. But here's the reality, and it shifts the whole picture. Northern cardinals don't migrate. They're year-round residents, unlike the dark-eyed juncos that arrive in your yard every October and leave in March, unlike the white-throated sparrows that fill your shrubs in November and are gone by spring, unlike even some of the American robins you see in summer. The Northern Cardinal in your yard right now has almost certainly never left. Not for the winter, not for another season. He lives here. The Cornell Lab of Ornithology has been tracking individual cardinal movements through citizen science programs for decades, and the picture that emerges is consistent. Male Northern Cardinals maintain territories of roughly 1 to 2 acres, year-round across multiple winters. The holly bush by your fence? Already inside his lines. The feeder you put up last October? He already knew about it before you filled it. Your yard is his yard. It was his yard before you started noticing him. What changes is not the bird. What changes is you. He isn't arriving from somewhere. He isn't choosing you over other options, making a daily calculation about which yard to visit. He's defending territory he's held for years, and your kitchen window happens to look out onto it. The Northern Cardinal's range covers most of the eastern half of North America now, from the southern edge of Maine down through Florida, from the Dakotas through Texas and into Mexico. 100 years ago, the cardinal was primarily a southern bird. He's expanded north as suburban landscapes gave him what he needs: dense shrubs for cover and nesting, feeders through the cold months, the patchy edge habitat that forms at the margins of yards and fence lines. Northern Virginia, where I live, is right in the middle of what's now reliable, year-round cardinal country. In the flat gray light of December, when the leaves are down and everything is stripped back, you can find him almost anywhere you look. At the holly bush, at the sweat cage, on the fence rail, his red coat going somehow brighter against all that plainness. He shares that territory with a whole community. In December, the same acre he's defending includes Carolina wrens working the brush pile along the back fence, a tufted titmouse at the tube feeder, quick and precise, one seed at a time, mourning doves on the ground below, unhurried, a white-breasted nuthatch running head-first down the oak bark the way they do, as if gravity has a different agenda for them, blue jays moving through in groups of 3 or 4, loud and deliberate, checking the feeder and moving on. House finches at the Niger sock. He holds his ground in the middle of all that, visible, bright, announcing himself from the top rail of the fence or the upper branches of the holly. What it means, when you understand it this way, is something quieter and, I think, more true than being specially chosen. This bird isn't coming to you. He's already there, the way a neighbor is already there, not because they chose your street every morning, but because this is the street they live on. What you're sharing isn't his attention, it's his address. He was never visiting, he was always home. That's not a small thing once you feel the shift. You've been given something more durable than being chosen. You've been given a neighbor who has been here through every hard winter, every spring, every season. You were too preoccupied to look up from whatever was going wrong. He was here. He was singing from that fence rail. He had his own concerns that had nothing to do with yours, and he was here anyway. And then, there's the thing people tell you when they're trying to be careful with you. They mean well. They tell you that if you think it's the same bird every time, you're just seeing what you want to see. All cardinals look the same, they say. You can't tell them apart. It's probably a rotating cast of different birds, and you're reading continuity into what's just a busy feeder. I told myself this for a while. I told myself it was the scientifically responsible position. Here's the reality. Male northern cardinals exhibit what researchers call high site fidelity. Individual males, once they've established a territory, return to it, year after year. The research tracking individual birds through leg bands confirms this. You look at studies from the Journal of Avian Biology or the long-term data from Cornell, and the picture is consistent. A male cardinal holding a territory in October is, almost certainly, the exact same male holding that territory the following October, and the one after that. Individual males have been documented returning to the same territory for 4 to 5 consecutive years. This is not a marginal finding. This is what cardinals do. You are almost certainly seeing the same bird. And here's something that gets less attention than it deserves. You can tell them apart, not at a glance, not at first. But over time, with enough mornings, the differences are there. Crest feathers that sit differently from bird to bird. A worn primary on one wing. A subtle variation in where the red starts and the black mask ends. Individual birds are individuals. They carry their history in their feathers. The notched feather cardinal at my holly bush. I started really noticing the notch in the late spring of 2021 after maybe 5 months of watching. It's subtle. A small irregularity in the right wing, one primary that's slightly shorter than its neighbors. The kind of thing you only register once the same bird has come to the same spot enough times that you know his silhouette. What you're seeing is not a series of strangers. It is not wishful thinking. It is not a parade of interchangeable red birds. It is almost certainly one animal, living its life in the same territory it's been living in for years. And you have simply learned to see him. I'm not going to tell you it was my dad. I'm not going to tell you it wasn't. What I will tell you is that the bird is real, the notch is real, and the 4 winters are a documented, scientifically supported fact about how northern cardinals behave. Research on individual recognition in birds has shifted significantly in the last 20 years. Work from the University of Washington and the University of Cambridge has built a strong case that individual recognition, not just of other birds but of specific humans, is a basic cognitive feature of many backyard species. Chickadees do it. American crows do it famously. They've been documented holding specific grudges against specific people and passing that information to other crows in their group. Cardinals are less studied in this area specifically, but the direction the research points is clear. These birds are not looking at a category when they look at you. They're looking at you. I don't know what to do with that. I mean that plainly. There's also something worth sitting with here. The female Northern Cardinal sings. Most female songbirds in North America don't produce complex territorial song. The cardinal female does. Cornell's research has documented her singing from within the territory, maintaining contact calls with the male year-round, even in winter when most of the loud song has gone quiet. Mated pairs keep a constant low-level vocal conversation across the territory. Soft, persistent, back and forth between the holly and wherever he's standing on the fence rail. Still here, still here, still here. Two birds, in your yard, through the winter, saying that to each other. I keep coming back to that. What the science gives you, when you follow it far enough in this direction, is not a diminishment of what you've been feeling at the window. It doesn't tell you you're projecting. It gives you permission to say, I know this bird. I know which branch he prefers in the morning, which fence rail he favors in the afternoon. That's not projection. That's documented, observable, repeatable behavior. Calling it imagination is the part that doesn't hold up. And then there's the last part. The one that actually bothers me. The idea that the spiritual explanation and the scientific explanation are opposites, that you have to pick one. You've heard this. Either the cardinal is a sign, a message from someone you've lost, visiting to let you know they're still there, or he's a bird doing bird things in a territorial way, and the meaning you feel is in your head, not in him. Clean binary. Choose. Here's what I found, after 4 winters sitting with this particular question. The science doesn't make either of those answers easier. It makes them harder. Here's what the research says. The male Northern Cardinal has between 24 and 28 distinct song types documented through decades of work from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology and Ohio State University. He doesn't use them randomly. He sings from specific perches within his territory, the same fence posts, the same branches, year after year. You could map his vocal roots and they would overlap almost exactly with his physical territory. He returns to the same spots. He sings the same acre. The female sings too. I've mentioned this before, but I want it to land here. Most female songbirds in North America don't produce complex territorial song. The Northern Cardinal female does. And Cornell's research shows she does it at a level that rivals the males of almost any other species in your yard. They maintain this vocal relationship year-round. So here is what the science says, stated as plainly as I can. This bird has chosen your yard as his home. He defends it. He returns to it. He sings from it, from the same spots, year after year, in a voice that has between 24 and 28 different things it knows how to say. What you make of that, I genuinely cannot tell you. Here's where I want to say something directly. I've watched people I love, in real pain after losing someone, find something steady in a cardinal at their window. I've watched my wife stand at the back door on a cold December morning 3 weeks after her mother died, just watching the holly bush. I didn't explain territorial fidelity. I stood next to her and watched. And I've watched well-meaning people tell grieving people that their comfort is superstition. People who have never lost someone in a way that hollowed them out. People who learned rationality as a shelter and are now trying to offer it to someone who doesn't need a shelter. They need a hand. I want to be clear. When you tell a grieving person their comfort is scientifically unwarranted, you are not being rigorously honest. You're being unkind. And you are also wrong about what comfort is for. Comfort is not a factual assertion. It is not a claim that needs to be defended. It is not something that should survive peer review. The mourning dove on the fence, the American robin pulling worms on the lawn, the eastern bluebird at the nest box, none of them are sending messages. They're living their lives. But the way you feel when you see them in a moment of grief or loneliness or unexpected quiet, that is also real. That's not the bird lying to you. That's you being alive in the middle of something that hurts. The science doesn't tell you what the visit means. It tells you why the bird keeps coming back. Those are different questions. They don't compete. They live in completely different rooms. You're allowed to hold both. What the science gives you, the territory, the site fidelity, the song map, the individual markings, it doesn't replace the other thing you've been feeling. It gives it a floor. It says, this bird is real. He has been here a long time. He was here before you started looking. What you do with that is yours to decide. I don't know anyone who decided they couldn't hold both and was happier for the decision. There's a thing the research can't quite touch, and I've been trying to find words for it for 4 winters. Male cardinals sing from the same perches year after year. I know from watching the notched feather cardinal that this is true in a way I can now describe with some precision. He has a preferred spot on the top rail of the back fence, about 2/3 of the way toward the corner. He has the holly bush, 2 branches he uses, one in the morning and one in the late afternoon. He has one position on the sweat cage, one spot at the tube feeder the house finches haven't managed to take from him. At 7 in the morning in winter, gray and cold, I know more or less where he'll be. My dad died on a Tuesday in November 2020. I was standing in the kitchen when my phone rang. After I hung up, I stood at the window for a long time. I don't know how long. The yard was already stripped down, the Japanese maple bare, the light flat and gray, the holly still red along the fence line. I don't specifically remember seeing a bird that morning. I didn't start noticing the notched feather cardinal until a few weeks later. In December, when he started coming regularly to a new feeder I'd put up. But here's what I know now that I didn't know then. If a male cardinal becomes prominent in a yard in November, he was almost certainly already living in that neighborhood before November. Fall is when cardinals consolidate their winter territories, when the young males from earlier in the season push at existing edges, when the winter lines clarify. He was probably there in October. In September, he was there before I just started seeing him. I don't know what to do with that. 4 years of sitting with it, and I don't have a clean answer. I've stopped trying to manufacture one. I used to think that not having an answer meant I was still early in the process, that eventually I'd reach clarity one way or another. I've come to think that's not how this particular question works. Some things don't resolve. They just settle into the shape of your life, and you keep living around them. And that turns out to be enough. What I have is this. Every morning I see him at the holly bush. Not every morning he has his schedule, and it doesn't always sync up with mine. But most mornings, often enough, something settles in me that nothing else settles quite the same way. Not dramatic, more like the quality of quiet after a sound you've been hearing for a long time finally stops. The science tells me why he's there. It tells me about site fidelity and territorial return and the pair bond he maintains year-round with a female I rarely see, but know is somewhere in that thicket. It tells me he was there before I started looking. It doesn't tell me what I'm supposed to do with the feeling. The eastern bluebirds have been back at the nest box on the back fence the last few weeks. The Carolina wrens are building again in the corner of the porch. I can hear the male singing from the Japanese maple in the mornings, one of the loudest birds for his size you'll find in a suburban yard, barely bigger than a deck of cards, and singing like he owns the whole block. The American robins were moving through the front lawn this week, 10 or 12 of them spread across the grass in that deliberate walk they have, pulling worms. The yard is moving forward. It keeps doing that, regardless of what's happened inside the house. The notched feather cardinal was at the holly bush this morning. 4th winter, still there. If you found yourself standing at a window lately, watching a bird who keeps showing up, I want you to hear this. The science says you're right that it's probably the same bird. It says you're right that he's been there longer than you knew. It says his song fills a specific acre of the world that happens to overlap with yours, and that this has been true through seasons you weren't watching for it. What it doesn't say is what to do with that. What to make of the morning when the yard is bare and the light is flat and something red moves through the holly bush, steady, like it belongs there. Because it does. He belongs there. And somehow, I still can't explain this part cleanly, that makes it more, not less. I don't know, I'm still figuring it out. 4 winters in, and I suspect I have a few more to go. Tell me in the comments if something like this has happened to you. I want to hear about it. I read everyone, and honestly, these are the stories I carry the longest. I'll see you in the next one.